Here at Cartridge Blow, we love us a monster movie. Ever since we first saw Fay Wray scream away up the side of the Empire State Building with a giant sweaty gorilla palm wrapped around her, there has been something about these gargantuan beasts and walking nightmares that has thrilled us like an electric current through the bolts in our neck. Maybe it's the fear that courses through our veins whenever we see a set of pointy fangs that attracts us to the darker side of cinema, or maybe it's the fact that we're just sick little puppies who love to see a good chest bursting scene over their morning cornflakes. But whatever the reason, we've been enthralled by werewolves, huge monkeys and mutated lizards stomping on Tokyo for so long now that we think it's time we decided who the king of monsters truly is. For anyone who's been unfortunate enough to have only watched the 2010 Abomination, you may find yourself wondering why this character is anywhere near this video, but there was a time when the Wolfman was considered a cornerstone of horror. That time was 1941, and even though Universal's film was a bog-standard werewolf tale, a man gets attacked by a beastie with sharp pointy teeth and at the next full moon goes feral and bitey before finding himself put down, it was the performance of Lon Chaney Jr. as the tragic lead Larry Talbot and the stupendous makeup of Jack P. Pierce that means this dog will never get taken out behind the woodshed. Robert Louis Stevenson's 1886 novella, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, has had a pretty fair representation on film over the years, but it's this version that nearly every horror fan remembers, and with good reason. The 1931 Paramount picture might not have aged well in some eyes, but there is no doubt that Jekyll's transformation into the monster Hyde still stands the test of time. The use of coloured makeup and filters slowly reveals the good doctor's evil half, and when we finally get our first look at Hyde, designed by Wally Westmore, even today it's pretty damn breathtaking. And just think, when MGM bought the rights to the property, they demanded that every copy of this movie be destroyed so they could rewrite history with Spencer Tracy. Before we go any further, can we all agree that the Brendan Fraser franchise was the last time that Universal tried anything with a mummy? You know, maybe that way we can ignore the utter abortion that was Tom Cruise destroying any chance of a monsterverse before it even got off the slab. Ever since Boris Karloff shuffled out of his sarcophagus back in 1932, we've always had a soft spot for this character. He shouldn't really be scary. After all, he has the top speed of a glacial drift, so as long as you can walk at least somewhat quickly, you should be alright. But there was something so intimidating in the way that Karloff played the character that this undead nightmare has been moaning around for nearly 90 years now. But it wasn't just Big Boris that would do the mummy justice, as the Hammer horror version with Christopher Lee and the bloody bandages is still as fantastic today as it was in 1959, even if Lee hated the role with a passion due to the costume he was forced to wear. Fay Wray screaming and fainting all over the place, dinosaur fights, and a giant bloody monkey climbing up the side of the Empire State Building, King Kong is the definition of a classic monster movie. We can't imagine what it must have been like to see the giant ape brought to life on the big screen in 1933, but considering that nobody had ever done anything like it before, it must have been pretty brown trousering juicing. And even though the stop motion looks a bit jerky today, we'd rather take this version of everyone's favourite gorilla over whatever that was Peter Jackson forced upon the world in 2005. Allegedly named after Spielberg's lawyer Bruce Raymer, Bruce the Shark swam his way into monster folklore in the 1975 blockbuster Jaws. The man-eater terrorises Amity Island right from the opening scene when he's chowing down on a night swimmer, up to the end where he goes kablammo from the world's luckiest shot. But it wasn't just the residents of the town or Police Chief Brody he enjoyed annoying. The fact that their massive mechanical shark seemed to break down whenever it looked at a glass of water made filming Bruce a massive ball ache, and it's the reason that he's used so sparingly in the film. But something that could have been detrimental to the finished product only enhances the sense of fear you get when you hardly see the creature lurking beneath the waves until he pops out and bites you in half. Certainly not one to win any beauty pageants, the Predator is the perfectly designed hunter with only one thing on its mind: skulls, and lots of them. Ignore the sequels, ignore the attempted reboot that was as badly misguided as it was awful. It's the original outing where he goes toe-to-toe, mano a aliano with Arnie and his Super Jack crew that has stood the test of time. You hardly see him for a vast majority of the movie, only the blooded trail of dead he leaves in his wake. But when he finally does show himself, the murder spree he's been on has already scorched this monster deep into your brain. And the fact that he nukes the out of himself and everything in the surrounding area instead of allowing Dutch the pleasure of vengeance, well, that's just icing on the cake. The Xenomorph is one of the most iconic designs in the history of cinema. It's a huge, hulking figure topped off with an incredibly elongated head and more teeth than BTS. It spits and bleeds acid while its offspring bursts from your chest as you try to eat a civilized meal. What's not to like? We could have filled up this entire list with monsters from the Godzilla films and their spin-offs, but that would have been cheating and lazy and has nothing to do with the fact that we're going to be doing a completely separate video dedicated to Toho's mascot in the near future. No siree, Bob. Ever since he stomped on Tokyo in 1954, the giant lizard has been one of the best creations to ever set rubber foot on a tiny model town. A reaction to the horrendous actions of the US dropping atom bombs on 2 Japanese cities, Godzilla is a cautionary tale of what happens when you mess around with powers beyond your control. A huge goddamn monster shows up and stomps it out of you. Though the Universal version of Mary Shelley's iconic book takes a few liberties with the plot, this version of Frankenstein's monster is the one that will carry on through the annals of time until the planet goes poof when the sun burns out. And it's not hard to see why. The combination of Boris Karloff's brilliant performance, managing to give remarkable depth to the tortured creature, and Jack P. Pierce once again nailing the makeup, has helped Adam still remain relevant today. And if you don't have at least a poster or a t-shirt with his face looming out at you, then can you really call yourself a horror fan? Bela Lugosi never managed to shake the count and spent the rest of his career typecast as a villain. And even though that was a tragedy for someone who considered himself a serious actor, for fans of the macabre it's not difficult to see why. Dracula is the ultimate monster. A blood-sucking vampire, the personification of evil, who has only one thing on his mind: to turn the world into the land of the dead. He nails this performance so perfectly that if horror movies were an Olympic event, he'd have scored 10s across the board. Like Adam before him, Dracula will always be associated with one man, no matter how much Gary Oldman tried to ham his way into the reckoning. And though this was detrimental to the person who played him, it's impossible to think of anyone else in the role. So there you have it, the 10 best classic movie monsters of all time. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did we miss any out? Let us know down in the comment section, and if we have entertained you, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe.